the Neurodivergent Musician Podcast. I'm your host, John Hyde, with Luna. Today I'll be talking about mental health. Alright, enough of that. So each episode is broken up into a Traffic format, where I'll share insights in the red section, improvised stories in the amber, and recommendations you might find handy in the green. So mental health, yes, can be seen as a negative thing, and I try to make as light of it sometimes as possible. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to get through the day. So anyway, let me go into my insights, and then obviously I'll go into my improvised babble. See you in the next section. Okay, so let's move on to the red section, which is the insights. And in the background, you will be able to hear a dog barking, and he's not stopped barking for a long, long time. And I've tried redoing this section so many times, and I just thought, screw it. He can just keep barking. He's having the time of his life, obviously. So, if you hear that in the background, that's just nature. However it is, you might hear some birds. Whatever it is, I'll try and get through it without being triggered at the same time. Anyway, we are on to the red section. So, as individuals who are neurodivergent, we may be more susceptible to mental health issues such as depression, anxiety, and ADHD. Although many people see music as a joyful hobby and art form, studies indicate that 70 to 80% of musicians struggle with their mental health, which is huge. The Musicians Union, who I'm a part of, and many musicians are, provides further details on this subject, and they recently asked me to create an article about being a neurodivergent musician. I suggest taking a look at it when you have the chance, as it gives a brief overview of my daily life. However, in this podcast, I will delve deeper into the topic and provide some tips and strategies for maintaining good mental health as a neurodivergent musician. This is something I struggle with on a daily basis, so I have to take my own advice at the same time. The stress of being a musician, dealing with the music industry, and attempting to navigate a volatile, uncertain, and insecure work environment can be harmful. Adding a neurodivergent brain to the mix can take a toll on our mental health. So first and foremost, self-care should be our top priority. This entails looking after our physical health by getting enough sleep, eating a healthy diet, and exercising regularly, which can be challenging given how much time we spend working, which can be 24/7, especially with building up a music career. It also entails taking care of our emotional well-being by engaging in activities that bring us joy, such as playing music or spending time with loved ones. While pursuing our passion of music, we often take on multiple projects, roles, and tasks, which can be exhausting. Although we are committed to our job, we must understand that receiving help necessitates jumping through several hoops, such as building a team, raising funds, and assembling assets, which is just a constant struggle in the modern music industry at the moment. For neurodivergent individuals, setting boundaries is an important aspect of self-care. We may be more sensitive to stress, which can trigger anxiety and depression. As a result, it is critical to understand our limits and to say no to things that may be too much for us or may end up taking up too much time. This could mean declining gigs or events that we know will be overwhelming, or setting limits on our work hours and social media use. There are several apps and browser extensions out there that can set timers and limit our social media exposure. I had one that has sort of kill your social media feed or something like that, and I use that all the time, especially when I've been on social media just scrolling and scrolling. We know what that feels like. It is also crucial to seek support when we need it. This may include therapy or counselling, talking to close friends or family members, or joining support groups for neurodivergent individuals. There are numerous resources available on Facebook that can provide us with the support and understanding we need to manage our mental health. Another strategy for maintaining good health is to practice mindfulness. Mindfulness involves being present in the moment and easing stress and intrusive thoughts. Not all the time, as we can become overwhelmed, especially when working in a collaborative environment. This practice can assist us in becoming more aware of our emotions and thoughts, and allowing us to manage them more effectively. So finally, for this red section, it is important to recognize when we require professional assistance. Mental health issues can be severe and may necessitate treatment from a mental health professional. If you are experiencing symptoms of depression, anxiety, or other mental health issues, do not hesitate to seek help from a mental health professional. There's lots of links online, crisis lines, all sorts of things that you can go to. And I'll be discussing other platforms and companies such as Help Musicians UK, Music Mind Matters, and many more out there. So that is it for the red section. Let's take a quick break and we'll go into the amber, where I'll go into my improvised, convoluted babble for the next, 20 minutes or so. See you then. Cheers. Bye. Okay, and welcome back. So we are now into the amber section, where I'm going to go into my improvised stories, thoughts and insights. If you are a neurotypical or, even neurodivergent, you go, man, this guy waffles, or he doesn't even make any sense. Just go with it. Take whatever you need, take a pinch of salt. There might be some useful things in there. You might just think, okay, this guy is story time, so play it at bedtime. I might be able to send you to sleep. And if you are fed up, obviously you can stop. But please do, have a listen and, listen to what I've got to say. So mental health. Oh man, mental health. Sort of a start in life. I'll go into a quick story. I'll try and make it as succinct as possible, but knowing with a neurodivergent brain, it won't be. But growing up with a parent who's severely ill, and then, having divorced parents, going into foster care, being looked after by my dear nan and aunt, and, my nan became a mother figure, a strong mother figure of my life, and she passed away last year. And I'll be going into an episode about grief and the 5 stages of loss, which is sort of included in the album. So I'll play some music and talk and stuff. But anyway, having that kind of background, and then moving in, back with my mum and dad and lots of other things, and trying to navigate that life, and sort of stuck between two families. And it's one of those where I don't look back. I mean, it's in no way no one's fault. It's just one of those things that happen. Everything's been pulled apart and scattered everywhere, and everyone's doing the best they can, whether they are a father, a mother, an auntie, an uncle, a cousin, a nan, all sorts of things. And everyone's got their own perspective, and it's all subjective as well, as much as, there's some factual things as well. But then there's the children in the middle of it. And obviously now, hitting 40 this year, it still stays with me. And, obviously there's trauma built into, going into foster care and being pulled apart with that. And again, there's no blame or anything as well. It's more me trying to make sense of it. But it means that my mental health has suffered my whole life. And I don't know whether there's some genetic things from parents that have sort of been handed down, especially with the sort of severely mentally ill parent. But as I grow up and I went into, my teens, and just before that, I got my guitar for my 8th birthday, and I used to carry it around like a comfort blanket, like a child would with their teddy bear or blanket. And I carried this guitar around me at school and things, and I got the nickname Johnny Guitar. I used to go and travel on the back of buses on the Isle of Wight, and I used to go and make a little bit of money to pay for my travel. And this was in my late teens. I did crazy things like, I remember spending a summer, I recorded 8 albums of utter shit, but it made me who I was, and music was so important to me. But I was heavily into, how can we say it, not only alcohol, but other things I was very, very heavily into. I'm not going to go and put myself into trouble. And I went to the extreme with it. And I think that's the neurodivergent brain, the addiction side of it. And I really got addicted to lots of different things. You experiment, but then you can get too much. And I remember having to go to the doctors, and my late granddad, bless him, took me there to get me off of what I was smoking heavily. It doesn't go alongside your mental health when you go and have too much alcohol and you have too much of the other stuff that you're smoking, or then you're doing other things. Too much of something is never a good thing. It's like too much caffeine. I've gone to that point before where I've had so much caffeine I'm literally shaking for the rest of the day. But all these things can cater towards those compounding things that go against you with your mental health. And we often just go, no, just, screw it, we only live once. And we have that phrase that we carry around with us all the time. Screw it, we only live once. Screw it, we only live once. And it's almost like we wear this badge all the time where it's, a cat has 9 lives, but we can have this, let's just do it now, impulsively. But it can have a detriment to mental health afterwards. So when you're out in the night out and you're like, screw it, right, let's just have like one more beer, and then before you know it, you've got into like, a stonking night, and then you then have the ramifications the next day when you're, hungover and things. But I think with my mental health, I masked it a ton. I think because of my beginning and moving around so many different places, it put that kind of environment where I was constantly on my toes and I could just never settle, let alone me now and knowing I have a neurodivergent brain. But the thing is, when you have that sort of unsettled feeling inside of you and you have internal chaos, you then try to go and find external things to fill that internal void. And you'll hear me, this is going to be on repeat. I'm going to sort of, this recurring theme, it's like a recurring dream that keeps coming around, where, again, I've written lyrics, if I find my internal light, I'll have eternal life. But I've only been able to find that now in my late 30s. And it's almost felt like I've had 39 years of internal chaos. And with my mental health, you have other things. You have imposter syndrome. You have so many different things, anxiety, depression, especially when you're going in through education. When I was at school, I was just like, oh man, I was in the lower groups all the time. And if you're a high functioning creative and you're slotting into the academic education system that is geared for neurotypicals and what I call mono mode, where you have to streamline your brain and you have to focus on one thing going on at the same time. Whereas I'd sit in class and I'll be fidgeting, or like I'd hear something out the window and then I hear the radiators start to, I don't know, make some noise. I hear a cough, I hear fidgeting, I hear the teacher scraping this. So it's not just listening to the information, it was like all the textures around me, all these other things, real sensory overload in some cases. Then when you don't get the mark, it adds to your mental health load. And then you carry that on to college. And the beauty thing about when I went to, and I did a music course, which was a BTEC course, it was geared to my, my creative brain, my neurodivergent brain. And there wasn't as much academia. And I was really able to excel in some places there. I did some flipping stupid things. I remember getting a guitar that was like luminous yellow, and I stripped the wood with a torch, a blowtorch, like an idiot, and then just like I didn't take out all the electrics, so I melted all the electrics like an idiot. And then I had my exam literally around the corner, and I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. So I would do shit that would put me into mental health trouble. And this was just constantly in my life. There was this impulsive action in me to do things. And then afterwards I was like, oh, I wish I never did that. And I compare this to, for adults, if you go out on a night out and you go heavily drinking, and then the next day you're so hungover, you're like, I'm never going to do that. Why did I do that? And funny enough, my brother, when we were on my stag do, I remember him saying about himself as the evening guy and himself as the morning guy. And the morning guy hates the evening guy because he does so many wild things all the time. And I was like, oh, do you know what? That stuck with me, because it's like, that's what mental health feels like sometimes. You kind of get a glimmer of hope. You get this glimmer of, oh, I feel so good. And the batteries have charged up. And it's almost like when your phone's charged up, you're like, I'm going to open every single app on my phone. I'm going to do everything. And it wipes out the battery really quickly. Whereas what you should be doing is obviously eking out the battery so it lasts a little bit longer so you don't crash. But we have this kind of like extreme high, and then we have burnout. Extreme high and then burnout. And I think that's how mental health, my mental health works with it. It's not like fluctuating between 40 and 60% all the time. It fluctuates between 20 and 80. So I'm like, go, 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 go. Burnout, 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 burnout. Go, 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 go. And problem is, if you're constantly living that life, something is going to crack and something's going to break. So I went along with the flow of life. So my wife, we got together at university. We then got engaged. I asked her to marry me after a year. And looking back, I was like, was that ADHD? Like, you literally just do something, really snappy. But what I hadn't done is I asked her to marry me, but I hadn't asked, the permission from her parents. And she comes from a Catholic family. I was like, crap, there's tradition here and stuff. So, and that added unnecessary mental health. And this is what I would do. I would make a sharp decision straight away. I'd spend like lots and lots of money, or I'd do something crazy. And then afterwards, I'd be reeling from it for days and days and days. But you're having to try and carry on a normal life. So, but anyway, we got married. We saved up for a house. We've had 2 amazing children. And it all comes, you're parenting, you're trying to run a business, you're trying to work, you're trying to do all these things. And, like trying to run a music business and a music career, or build a music career, it's a 24/7 job, because you are creating things, you are, trying to build assets all the time. And then you're trying to, communicate with lots of people. You are traveling, you're touring, you've got multiple different jobs, whether it's recording, you're performing, you're teaching, you're doing session work, you're doing all these things. And I call it like the independent musician sort of pie chart that sort of fluctuates every year. So you might have like 40% teaching, you might have 20% of this and all sort of stuff. It fluctuates, and it's, it's unsecure, it's not very stable. But as the neurodivergent brain, you love the flexibility, and you love that you get to do, what you've always wanted to do. But I think if you haven't reached that level and cracked open the music industry or things, I'm not saying it's less stress when you get to that point, but when you've got a team around you that can focus on your weaknesses and allow you to focus on your strengths, then your mental health is at risk all the time. And I kind of sort of think, ever since I crashed my wedding business, music wedding business, that I built up, and it was award winning and it was all going great. And then I crashed it in 2017, and I had a management at the time, and they gave me some bad advice. And, I was kind of sleep deprived of parents, and obviously I was taking advice, and I crashed it by deleting a page, and I lost all my Google ranking and business overnight within 24 hours. This felt like half of my salary had gone, and then I had to tell my wife, and then that fear of failure became true. And I come from like this highly successful wedding musician, which again is one of the sort of strings to the bow of a career musician, to like, shit, I have lost all of that. Now, I've heard lots of, famous entrepreneurs who have had, bankruptcy and they've lost businesses and stuff as well. And then they've moved on forward and they have had a breakthrough and stuff as well. And I do think you need the failures to build success, because if you don't know how far the drop is, you don't know how to make that easier for you next time. So for instance, I've had huge drops, but the next failure I had, the drop wasn't so deep, and then, so on and so on and so on. But we all didn't know that COVID was going to come along. And then, especially for the music industry, it sort of paused everything. And then I was at home, homeschooling, trying to start up a new business or try to pivot into online courses, and then trying to run a house, trying to do so many things, obviously. And it was just a world of anxiety at the same time. We didn't know if we were going to get ill. We didn't know about loved ones, if we could see them. It was just like economically, on a personal level, with family, family members dying, all sorts of things worldwide. It was just chaos that I think it's going to live with us for the rest of our lives. That kind of invisible war that went on, or peacetime, however they call it. But my whole business paused, and then I tried to build things, and side businesses, and I tried to do all these sort of things, educate myself as best as I could. And I built all these amazing courses by the end of it, but it was detriment to my mental health. And then last year in 2021, sorry, that's not last year, that's a few years ago. At the end of 2021, it was spiraling bad. And then I got put onto meds, which is SSRIs. I tried sertraline, and then with sertraline, it's sometimes like a driving test, really. A majority of people I know have passed second time. So I took sertraline, and then it was, they say after 2 weeks, you'll feel groggy for 2 weeks, and then start to get better. And it didn't start to get better. I then had these financial compounding things coming on top. I had bills coming through the door, letters coming through the door, and it was just like 6 to 12 weeks of just compounding shit. From a panic attack at the beginning, to going on SSRIs, to then having a letter through the door of, you need to pay this back. And it was like even crap like, you have to pay back this huge bill that would collapse my business, and all sorts of things. And I had, my support network, like accountants and things as well, who they had things going on in their lives, and it just, I wasn't getting seen. I wasn't, I was trying to get in contact with these people, as we do with HMRC and all sorts of stuff. And it just feels like you are drawing blood out of a stone or smacking your head against a wall. And I was doing this on top of, my mental health was going into crisis. Meds were taking their toll, and obviously meds can change you in some ways, especially if you're on the wrong ones. And then compounding things of, bills coming through the door and business crashing and all sorts of stuff. And then I had a meeting cancelled in December of 2021. And then I went into crisis for a week. And it's, the worst kind of suicidal, making, and there, I can't really, I mean, I'm going to go into another episode about crisis, and, it is sensitive information. And if you do feel anything about this that doesn't feel right, and I'm trying to prevent it rather than, acknowledge it or talk about it in some ways. And obviously there is crisis helplines, and there is one great service was called Shout. It was a text service. I couldn't get on with the other services. One of them didn't pick up for 2 minutes, which was just ridiculous. Some of them felt predictable. Some of them felt patronizing. And I was just like, oh my days. No, I'm not recommending any of these. But the one that I felt was the best was called Shout. It was a text service. And what that allowed me to do is to write everything out. And I had to write everything, which was really uncomfortable. But when my wife came home and she was asking everything, I was able to hand her the phone. And then she was able to see, all the things that were going in my head, from making plans to, all stuff. And I'm not going to go into the details of the plan. I don't. Everyone has their own subjective experience, feelings of when you do go through that. And that was the worst case of my mental health. And the reason why I wanted to start this podcast and wanted to start this awareness is to prevent my fellow musicians going into crisis and suicidal and things as well. And I'm open about it because I feel it needs to be talked about, and I don't want it to be a taboo subject. I don't want it to feel, the stigma of, oh no, we can't talk about that. No, we can't talk about that. In especially males as well. I know a lot of my male mates have got in contact with me and said, mate, you're so brave. I can't even talk about that and stuff. And I go, why? So it's sort of led me on that journey to just keep speaking up about it. Because the problem is, if we don't, then we then get stuck in our own heads, and then we've got no one to talk to. So if you are suffering, please just go and seek help. Hey, welcome back. So we're now into the green section where I'm going to go through a recommendation. And today's recommendation is, if you are suffering as a musician and you're based in the UK, I would go and check out Help Musicians UK and Music Mind Matters. Now, with these two platforms, companies, charities, they have helped me out immensely. When I was in post-crisis number one, I really didn't know what to do. I had no one to talk to in regards to how do I get money coming in, because the finances were like a catalyst to the crisis in the end. There were so many other compounding effects, but it was the finances and trying to keep the business running, as we all feel as musicians. But when I contacted Music Mind Matters, they were just super supportive. And then you have to do an application, you have to do all these things, but then you can then get funding to help with when you're going through post-crisis and you're having to take out months out, whether it with a doctor's note and all sorts of things. But then, with Help Musicians UK, I met up with them, and I hope to get Help Musicians UK to come on as a guest down the line. That might happen, I'm not sure. But they were also able to help in regards to the period when I was not working, help out with counselling, help out with career coaching, and all sorts of things. And they're there for musicians who are in crisis, or they are struggling. And, not obviously everyone can get access to things. Depends on the severity, depends on what's happening in your life. But if you feel you've hit a point where you're in financial crisis, or you're in this kind of crisis, whatever it is in your career or mental health or whatever it is, just go and open up a dialogue with Help Musicians UK or Music Mind Matters. So that is it for this episode. Very long-winded, and thank you so much for watching it. I knew it would be with mental health. Thanks so much for listening to The Neurodivergent Musician. And if you do know any musicians that will find this informative, please do share away. And you can head on over to johnhartmusic.com for updates on the album and so many other things going on at the same time. So thanks so much for listening, and I'll see you in the next episode. Cheers. Take care.